So I think we can start now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar of our successful initiative, A Year Without Public Space Under the COVID-19 Pandemic. I am Luisa Bravo, the founder and editor-in-chief of the journal Public Space. This initiative is jointly promoted by City Space Architecture and the School of Architecture at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and curated by myself and my colleague Hendrik Tieben. Today we are having a very interesting webinar on the role of renewable energy in post-COVID-19 public spaces. With this webinar, we close the August series, and at the end of the webinar, we will announce the next series, which will be the last one of our initiative in September with other 4 webinars. I'm supposed to just give you a welcome since we have other co-hosts for this webinar. I just would like to point attention to the fact that this is our 16th webinar. When we started to talk about this initiative with my colleague Hendrik Tieben and some other colleagues all around the world, it was March, April, and we didn't expect so much interest around the public space. So we are very happy to see that there is a lot of expertise, knowledge, and also the willingness to share, to meet and to talk more about public space. We really believe as academic scholars and public space activists that this is the time to talk especially on public space, and to go back to how people will be able to live together again in the public domain during this pandemic, and also reimagining a different future for the post-pandemic era. So I now give the floor to my colleague to introduce our co-hosts and speakers. Thank you. Hendrik, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Luisa. So also welcome from my side for this session. And as Luisa already also mentioned, this is a 16th webinar, and I found it quite interesting that even though we had already 15 sessions before, that this particular session really has a entirely new take on this topic and opens up a new perspective by basically linking the question on the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on public space to questions of resources and generation of renewable energy. And together with this interesting combination of topics, also we have a group of panelists that all not only as a panel overall, but also many of the individuals have very transdisciplinary backgrounds, so often combining expertise in design of public space or land art projects, but at the same time also have knowledge in science and the use of resources and renewable energy. So I find this quite exciting. So I believe I can also learn a lot in this session. And I want to introduce our 2 co-hosts that actually came to us and approached us with the idea of this session. And I was also first kind of intrigued to see this combination with the relationship to pandemic, maybe due to my own ignorance, maybe. And I'm quite intrigued now that we can have this session in our series. So we will have, we have a co-host, Alessandra Scognamiglio. She's an architect and researcher at the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy, and Sustainable Economic Development. And we have Agatino Rizzo, architect and acting chair at the Lulea University of Technology in Sweden. And both of them will guide through this session and also introduce more in detail the topic and also the different panelists. The more information about their biographies you can also find on our website. We want to keep this here relatively short, that we have more time for discussion. So I want to give the word to Agatino to start with the introduction of this session.
Great, thank you so much. So let's see if I can now share my screen. Can you see it? Yeah?
Yes.
Let's see. Great, let me see here. Okay, so it's on the other screen. So probably I will have to face away from the monitor. But thank you very much, Luisa. Thank you very much, Hendrik. I want to acknowledge the Journal of Public Space for this opportunity to talk today and to present this, I think, quite interesting topic. Just a few words to say that all of this started with a WhatsApp conversation with Alessandra in the end of June. And yeah, we exchanged some messages to say, like, we were a little bit puzzled, also bothered a little bit about what was happening in terms of public space, because for many years we have worked with the issue of integration of renewable energy into the public space. But then we were seeing with the new situation with the COVID-19, we were seeing that there is more pressure into the public space. And we think that we couldn't understand exactly. We had an idea what type of issues we could have into the future, but we wanted to discuss together with all of you. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And also, I think the best way to start is first of all, to say, my name is Agatino and I work at Lulea, University of Technology, in a group of architecture. And some of the research we do in this group deals with energy, actually a lot of it. One colleague of mine is going to talk, Björn is going to talk later on, is going to show his projects. So if I go a little bit forward, I think as an introduction, what I would like to do very briefly is just to present the baseline for people who work, for architects and planners who work with energy. So who work with the city and public space with energy. And as you can see, like in these two pictures, we can see that the demand for energy into the future is projected to increase. You can see, like in the two numbers underlined in red. We can see, of course, that the contribution of renewable energies in the near future is going to increase. It's already increasing a lot. At the same time, we have still like a very strong contribution of non-renewable energy sources into this production of energy in this demand, so which we need to consider. So the future means more energy, and still reliance on non-renewable energy fuels. For a country like Sweden, the situation looks a little bit like this. We are quite good at the European scale. Lots of our energy is produced from renewable energy sources. Most is hydro actually, but still, as you can see, the majority of energy sources still come from non-renewable sources, nuclear fuels and fossil fuels. And of course, there is a challenge also to how to work with the transmission losses, which you see here on the top right of the image. At the same time, and I will briefly talk like a little bit more about this, there is the question of how the energy demand is going to change into the future, because as we know, public transport at the moment is questioned for the reason of physical distancing. So we don't know how the domestic transport in the future is going to evolve. And this has a big impact into the city and public space. Now, from an urban and architectural point of view, we focus on what we call like a resource urbanization nexus. This means that the way we design the city, the way we shape city, streets, public space, buildings affects energy demands. In turn, the energy demands affects climate. And of course, climate in turns with the mechanism of feedbacks will affect again cities. And here you see like three screenshots this kind of nexus when it's related to air pollution, or whether it is related to flooding or hurricanes, or whether this is related like to wildfires. And of course, we know what is happening right now in California and what has happened a few months ago in Australia. So from an architecture point of view, I think this is important to understand, to try to urbanize this climate and energy issues, to understand it in this way. Now, from looking at this nexus and at these questions from a country like Sweden, it's not that big, it's probably not very relevant worldwide, but like many other countries in the world, we have like signed, our government has signed the Paris Agreement. And as you know, in the Paris Agreement, each country has pledged to reduce CO2 contribution. It is called national determined contribution, that each country has to do an effort to reduce CO2. In Sweden, this means two things. The government has pledged by 2045 to reach a carbon neutral country, so at the national level. At the same time, by 2040, we are supposed to have 100% of energy production from renewable energy sources. At the moment, we are at 60%, which is the highest share in Europe, but still there is a lot of work to do to support this transition. Now, there are a few challenges if we think about energy with the lens of an architect or a planner. First challenge is that of prosumers. So how do we transition from a current energy monopoly, where there are a few companies that produce energies and there are many consumers, to the issue of energy democracy, in which consumers of energies can be producers? And then also there is the issue of socio-spatial acceptance. How do we make sure that this new technology, which we are going to roll out into our cities and landscape, are going to be accepted by the citizens, by the residents? How we are going to work with this issue? That is another issue that there is a lot of work in literature, and it's a big problem. At the same time, here I have to acknowledge also some of the work of my colleague Bjorn, which I'm sure is going to show later, regarding like the picture on the right. From a theoretical point of view, and also, let's say also practical point of view, we think that to deal with these challenges, we need to rethink the idea of city around the concept of resourcefulness, which from my point of view means three things. First, thinking about a deeper social technical integration of energy, which means the whole value chain of energy, from harvesting, distribution, use, and saving. So a deep integration of this system with the city structure at the technical level, but also from a social point of view, which is not that easy. We need to think the idea of resourceful cities from also as a shift, as we were saying before, from a large scale centralized to small scale decentralized resource management. So we are thinking about that the energy in the future should be produced nearby where people live, with probably small equipments that are integrated into the built environment in our everyday life. And perhaps there will be a mix of this and a little bit a mix of bigger like solar parks or what is it, like wind farms. So it would be a mix of this, but the small scale decentralized is still like a topic which is not very well studied. And then I think central contribution from an architecture point of view is the idea of rethinking the aesthetic of cities. So how do we imagine future cities around the idea of energy aesthetics? How the design thinking process, which is the one we use in planning and architecture, can help to shape a new idea of aesthetics, where the solar panel, the PV panel, or the wind turbine is not just something like that is attached at the end of the design process, but it's actually generating, it's changing the idea of imagining the space. Another like pictures a series of our works that we do here in Lulea, some from Bjorn and some from some of our projects. How can we mobilize, basically in this project, the question is, how can we mobilize design thinking as a way to think differently about future cities and future aesthetics? So we work with ideas of co-creation, of course, society engagement, and a lot with the design thinking process. All of this worked very well with few challenges before COVID-19, but now, as I was saying before with Alessandra, when we were discussing back in June, we have a new issue, that is that of physical distancing and public space. So I have here a set of pictures from Sweden, from southern Italy, the place where I'm from, and like also some initial like design adaptation which is happening currently in Italy, which is one of the countries most affected by COVID-19 in the world. The main problem is that especially like in Italy, but all over the world, as a way to manage the physical distancing, lots of private activities are projecting into the public space, are projecting out. And this means that the public space, little by little, is going to be used by private business. It's not the problem about that. The problem is that how do we think about this process? How do we manage this? When the public space is privatized, also temporary, what does it mean this? And how do we manage also the question of energy, in all of this? You can see like here, there is like a few terraces that take either the whole space of the sidewalk, even project into the street, or you can see like, you can see here the case like where tables are, of course, projected into the sidewalk, and again, this corresponds into the reduction of public space. And here you see an experiment in the center of Italy. So to wrap up this introduction, there are a few questions that it's something that interests me, and I hope it can also interest some of the speakers and maybe the audience, and we could have a discussion about this. First, very important question. Are the energy or climate questions in architecture losing focus when most institutions and people are concerned with the primary issue of human health, which we took for granted before? It's not granted anymore. So how does this affect climate issues? I think you have noticed that there are not very many news about climate change anymore. Then what does it mean this for us? What does it mean? Like, what further issues poses the new situation of COVID-19 when we deal with the quest for building future solar public space? And also how the design thinking process should be adapted to this new issue of physical distancing. How do we deal with that? Especially when we use design thinking process that is participative, when we work with stakeholders, when we work with citizens, residents, and all of the society. And also, is the health crisis steering us back towards silos thinking? And this means that because we have this crisis, is it this pushing to think again the cities in like sectoral ways, or do we think that design and the transdisciplinary way of thinking about design thinking can help still to address these challenges? And finally, what is or what should be the role of architects in this post-COVID-19 resourceful cities? That's it. So I leave now actually the floor to Alessandra to manage like the speakers. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Agatino. Before introducing the speakers, I would like to share just 2 or 3 slides, which were the starting point of the discussion together with Agatino. So one second. Okay, so my background is in the field of energy, and in particular the use of photovoltaics in buildings and landscapes. And it is mainly rooted in the organization of an initiative that happens since 2011, which is exactly on the relationship between photovoltaics, forms, and landscape. This is the reason why, for instance, already knew Robert and Elizabeth, we have been collaborating together to trying to figure out how renewables could take a form into the city or the landscapes. Now, during the lockdown and all the pandemic, this new concept of social physical distancing was a kind of shock in all the reasonings that we have done so far. Because let's say there is always a kind of hunger for public space, and in particular, as Agatino already said, when we think of renewable energies, there are several problems. One is the social acceptance, so it's already very difficult to find a way to get this system acceptable, and one important driver, of course, it's the aesthetics. So it is difficult to have this kind of systems within the city boundaries, and normally they are outside of the city boundaries. So this is a slide that shows what you can do to for using.
Alessandra, sorry, I think we do not see your slides. Can you try to share again the screen?
Yes.
Okay, now full screen mode.
Now it's okay.
Yes.
Works? Works? Okay.
We see the presentation, but not in full screen mode. So probably some pictures are cut. I don't know.
No, I don't know, because it's a full screen mode. So I would go ahead. It's not, let's say, super.
Okay, fine.
So the idea is for using renewable energies, one option is using the buildings, so there is no new land use, and it is for sure a very optimal option. Then there is an image from Ecosistema Urbano. So another option is trying to integrate photovoltaic modules, for instance, in urban structures like this one. And this is the idea that public space can be something, a kind of mix of different things. So a space for socializing, for instance, but also space for producing energy. And normally when we think of large photovoltaic systems, these are normally in the landscape, but also in this case we can integrate different functions. For instance, this is the so-called agrovoltaics, where the land is used at the same time for producing energy in terms of electric energy and food. So in this case it's like tomatoes. When we, sorry, okay, so when the concept of physical distancing came to our, let's say, mind, several different design ideas were just popping up. And some of these were, in a way, something worrying. And I'm referring especially to the idea of the use of the beaches in Italy. This is an Italian project, for instance, because due to the regulations about COVID, it was necessary to use much more space for only one person than in the past. And of course, this is causing problems in terms of privatization of the space. So if we think in terms of a spatial footprint and the space we need for the generation of the food we eat, the energy we use, our shelter, so the way we inhabit the planet, we already occupy more space than we could imagine, because even if we physically occupy only a small space, like in this case 25 square meters, then our energy footprint in terms of food and energy is much bigger. When we go to the public space and we consider this concept of the physical distancing, then it's even worse, because just for, let's say, chatting or for spending some time in the open space, then we need a lot of space. So this was the starting point of our reasoning. Plus, it's clear how this kind of concept can cause a fragmentation of the space, and this is also very problematic in terms of use of the landscape and the use of the urban space. So going to a narrower perspective, so coming back to renewables, the immediate reaction in several cities in Europe with respect to what Agatino already introduced was that private activities such as pubs and restaurants, bar and so on were allowed to use the public space for having some more space for the consumers. And this was in a way pushing out of the city boundary the use also of renewable energy. I mean, not really now, but in the future, it's clear that there will be a struggle between several different functions. And the idea of this webinar it came exactly from this kind of a consideration, that was how we can take advantage of this situation. And when we are designing renewable energies also in the landscape out of the city public space, how we can integrate different functions so that we don't lose the connectivity among people and of course the social relationships that the physical distancing is going to threaten. So that's all for my presentation. And now I'm very happy to introduce our speaker who will give their insights on these topics. So we have speakers from all around the world, and we are also very happy and very lucky to have Vincent Kitio from UN Habitat. He's the head of the Urban Energy Unit as a commenter. I kindly ask the speakers to briefly introduce themselves and then to try to stay in the 7 minutes they had. So the first speaker is Björn Ekelund from Luleå University of Technology in Sweden. Björn?
Yes, hi everyone.
Very yours.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I feel very honored to be here in this great team. And yes, Hendrik, I see your lovely science and working on it. How about that? Yeah, perfect. I'm very happy to be here, and my name, as I said, is Björn Ekelund. I'm an architect and urban designer. I am a researcher, colleague with Agatino, but I'm also the co-founder of the urban design office Warm Winter in Stockholm. To give some background on my presentation is basically to say that COVID-19 are about to rewrite the rules for the concept of density in urban design, increasing social footprints and increasing the need for public space. And now we're struggling to find our way back to what we are used to, or some of us are struggling to find a way forward to a change. And this change might be helpful or might benefit from the idea that there is the need for renewable energy. And that's basically what my project and presentation is about. But the concept of distancing in planning and urban design is not new. Distancing is what the industrial era has brought to the modernist urban planning and design paradigm during most of the 20th century. With increased technical solutions for energy production, sewage plants, waste management, power lines, commuting, etc. And all of this has been in the development idea of our modern infrastructure in distancing. And this has not been a problem. This has rather been a solution for economic growth, as being a means to an end. But this distancing comes with a price. And the price could simplified be described as a global sustainability battle between the two terms of effect versus efficiency. From a technical perspective, large-scale solutions located far away from people are more efficient. There's no question on that, thus creating a greater good. But from the point of understanding a transformational change, introducing new financial and local business opportunities, create greater robustness to disturbances, etc. Local solutions actually might have a greater effect, both on a social and on economic sustainability. And if this also means that sustainable infrastructure suddenly are adapted to make a greater footprint, such as public space, it also can increase the impact on ecological sustainability. So before COVID-19 and still, I worked on a number of projects to create reduced distancing between technology and humans. Instead of large-scale solutions, I would rather talk about all-scale solutions, finding the way through for implementing renewable energy production into any place possible, making it accessible for anyone possible, And it all started actually at my own university outside it. There's a quite big power line going through the area. And I realized how extremely non-place specific this power line is. It goes through a landscape, whether it's an urban landscape or natural landscape, without actually reacting to it. So my own starting point was how can I redesign a power line to react to a place specificness? And basically creating public spaces through the power line. So instead of an energy transmission, it was also a public space maker. And to make this, I used a technology called tensegrity, a construction technology that is. Tensegrity has all the components that an ordinary power line have. So basically, I never changed anything of the ordinary components. I have the distance, I have the power lines, and I had the poles, but I just reconfigured them. And reconfiguration of the existing elements can sometimes be quite helpful to understand new possibilities. So this also became one of the proposals for a competition on Iceland. It was also part of a larger exhibition in Europe for a couple of years. And this is the more in-depth study of tensegrity and power lines and how they actually could work from a more construction point of view. But the whole idea of this is still not the construction of the thing, power line and transmission. It's rather the construction of place. How can a construction be adaptive to a place and thus change its design? So a lot of the studies we have been doing in the early years, and with this I mean maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, was about the construction and how can construction contribute to place specificness. And this also led me into the idea of how can we create micro constructions of climate. Because I got an assignment at the office designing a wind power plant in Stockholm on a campus area. And on this campus area, I realized that, okay, so there's going to be a wind power plant. A lot of the public space is going to be taken into use. And maybe not for a beneficial point of view, but from a sort of bad point of view. So what I did, I was actually trying to elaborate on, okay, if the wind power plant is basically focusing on production of energy and at the same time the production of public space, what would it look like then? Then I realized that the construction I needed to work on was actually the microclimate. So a lot of the design was about increasing the wind speed at the places I needed it and reducing the wind speed on the square where people should stay. So basically it came out as a wind square, moving with these moving wind turbines on this piezoelectric floor, mixing both with people and energy production, creating wind where it should be and creating calmness where it should be. Moving from technology and climate to microclimate, I've also started to work quite a lot with people. I realized that this is not a change that I do as an architect alone. It's not a change that any technological engineer would do on its own. It's a change that needs to happen from everyone. So me and Tino, as he already has explained a bit about, has been working quite a lot with people and their idea of energy production. What is it? Where can it be? And how can it be designed? And it's quite interesting and really, really fun if you start integrating people into design process, because what happens is that they have fantastic ideas that you might never have come up with otherwise. And these ideas are something that we try to realize in the first kind of sketch design to the campus area of Piteå. So this actually quite intriguing combination of solar panels, water micro turbines, and some solar. Actually, the solar balls down to the right is to keep the water from freezing in the winter. So they actually had a great idea transforming their own campus from car parking space into energy production. And the energy production allowed it to become a place to meet people, a place to look at, a place to be at, a place to have concerts at, and so on. So the idea is not about transforming one space to energy. It's about transforming one space to a better space through the introduction of energy. And this project actually led me to another design task that we had, and this is the last one. I know I'm going to be short. So, and this design task was on the same campus I just showed you, but it was on the outskirts of it. You see the rather big blue square in the northern part of the plan. It was planned for an energy production solar panel field, fenced off from the rest, but there was leftover space there that could be used for it. When I got the assignment, I said, okay, so you have a leftover space of nature. You want to fence it off and introduce a technological solution to it. Why don't you think the other way around? Instead of this being a leftover space, why don't create a public space, but with the introduction of solar panels? So, and I also knew that in this project, I would collaborate with two main research groups. I was the architect for Warm and Winter, but then we had two research groups, one on energy, which was super important in this case, and one on wood construction. The team on energy.
Sorry, let me know that 7 minutes have already gone.
Okay, I have just one slide left. The team on energy wanted as many angles as possible to study, and that's what I gave them. So this was the basic idea, and this was the wood construction, and it came out and was built last year, and it came out as one public space in a winter landscape, transforming this leftover space into a very popular public space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Björn, also for staying in the time and for the very nice project. I will be curious to see what the other also speakers think about the last slide, which is very poetic. So just now I would like to leave the floor to Daniela. Daniela? Daniela?
Yes, Alessandra, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So if you can briefly self-introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Daniele Santucci. I'm an architect and a researcher at TU Munich. And starting from next week, I'll hold a professorship at Dortmund University of Applied Sciences and Arts. And I'm the co-founder of Climate Flux. And I will show some of the work we do within our company. So I'll sharing my screen. Is it working? Great, thanks. So thanks for inviting me to this very interesting discussion. I'd like to share some work we do because pandemics has also thrown in sharp relief the importance of public space and how we deal with public space. And one important thing we realized during these months is that we are facing another big emergency, that is the climate emergency. So we focus on the energy exchange between humans and the environment. And during this, especially during the lockdown, and even also right now, we are experiencing a sort of disembodiment. So the way we communicate and we interact with the environment has drastically changed than we had before. And especially in cities, we experience, in urban space, we experience this energy transfer from people to the environment and the other way around. And this is what we feel and what we define as comfort. But this is also affecting health and well-being for millions of people all over the world. And the climate crisis, here we see the temperature anomaly in 2018, which is increasing, which increased also last year and which is continually increasing, shows that these conditions will change. So we have a big health threat for millions of people. This map indicates the change in annual mean temperature, and we see that many cities in the world will have a temperature change in 2050 of almost 4 degrees in average, which means that we have peaks of over 10 degrees. We all know the concept of urban heat island effect, but besides the urban heat island effect, which is not the only effect of the climate crisis, we know about fires and high tides. And here we see an image of Venice in November 2019, when they experienced the highest acqua alta ever. And what is clear is that public space is highly affected by these phenomena. So what we do, we have three choices: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. And right now we are suffering. So many people are influenced by the consequences of climate in their everyday life, in transportation, in the way to work or wherever. And what we do, we developed, basing on the idea of health as a fundamental right for people, we developed a sensing techniques, a technique that allows to sense the environment and to quantify its effects. Basically, it's a portable weather station, and we call this experiment climate walk. And with these climate walks, we measure the different factors and map them. So we have been doing the climate walks in several places all over the world, and we put into relation the effects of the built environment on human comfort. Why is it important, and why is it related to the topic of renewable energy or energy? First of all, because we want to measure the quality of the built environment in terms of thermal exchange in energy flux, and we map it, and we can, let's say, make graphics and indicate and quantify these effects. And then we involve people, so people express their sensation, the thermal sensation, and we measure their physiology. So by combining this, we try to understand the transition between outdoor spaces and indoor spaces. So these are images of Singapore, of an experiment we have been doing there. Singapore has these very interesting conditions, transitional conditions between the outdoor, which is pretty extreme in terms of climatic conditions, very high humidity, very high solar radiation. And they created these spaces that are public, but they are covered. And somehow breaking this strong dichotomy between indoor and outdoor spaces. So we measured how people react by walking through these covered spaces, conditioned spaces, just ventilated spaces, to understand if we can reduce the cooling load in buildings. And we could rather bring quality into this transitional space, which is something we need to redesign in terms of architecture after our pandemic experience, in terms of density and distancing. And we realized that in terms of feeling and in terms of perceived temperature, we experience very strong shifts. So the need of cooling down the building just to provoke this sort of cold stress or cold experience when we enter a new space is not really fundamental. We could rather go to and think of more of other solutions. This is a huge canopy in Napoli that is reducing the perceived temperature by more than 10 K. And by creating these spaces, we could think how to reconfigure public spaces and create more comfortable urban places. And this is what I think is the biggest lesson we have from the pandemics, how important public spaces are and how important the design of these spaces is for our life. I tried to keep the 7 minutes.
You were so good that you did it in 5 minutes. So perfect.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, yeah, I can, of course, we can go back to if you have questions, or we can discuss these aspects
I think we have a questions and answers at the end of the presentation, yeah. So we will keep the questions for later on. So thank you, Daniele, again. I would like to now introduce Robert Ferrer and Elizabeth Monoyan, Land Art Generator Initiative, who are the more motivated since it's very early in the morning in their place in Seattle. So Elizabeth and Robert.
Thank you, Alessandra. And it's perfect speaking after the first two speakers, because what we have to say is, I think, a really strong follow-up. I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the co-founder of the Land Art Generator Initiative with
Robert Ferrer, the other co-founder, also architect.
We're pulling up our slides, but to start, I would like to just frame, and I think this follows nicely with the previous presentation, that we need to really understand the health effects of climate change and what's coming. It is estimated that 250,000 people will die from the effects of climate change every year between 2030 and 2050. And this will be from vector-borne disease, diarrhea, malnutrition, heat stress, and other indicators. And we know that we can see right now the impact the disease has on public space, and we know that more of this is coming through climate change.
Yes, and what Elizabeth just said is distant, not just socially, but temporally in terms of the future outcomes for generations. But what's important and what the COVID-19 crisis has pointed out is that the air pollution of combustion of fossil fuels is itself a public health risk that is extremely powerful. And if the research is true, 10,000 people are dying every year just from the air pollution, like Agatino showed the Beijing slide. That is an immediate concern, and we can focus people's attention for political action and change on the health risks of climate change from air pollution as well. And COVID-19 has laid bare the lack of resilience in our system, so it's important to address that as well. And what we do at the Land Art Generator Initiative is we look at the impacts on land use through oh, hold on a second. Here we go. On public spaces. If we go back to the beginning of electrification, all of our power plants were located in the hearts of our cities, and they were designed beautifully. Many of these have been converted into adaptive uses, of course, like the Tate Modern in London, for example. As our power plants were able to leave the city behind, they lost their relationship to human culture. They became pure utility. And this relationship of energy and utility and aesthetics has continued into the renewable energy sphere, giving some people pause to the proliferation of these infrastructures, especially as they get close to the places that we live and work. The land use implications of a 100% solar power world are seen on the screen here in these black rectangles. And if we look specifically at a country like Australia, we can see that the good news is that we really could place a lot of that into our urban centers near the places we live and work, which makes the energy more resilient and frees the need to disrupt green fields and natural environments with these infrastructures.
But of course, to do so, we need the input of community and designers and interdisciplinary process to reimagine these energy landscapes. So the Land Art Generator Initiative focuses on that. What would renewable energy installations look like if they are public art and if they respond to culture and site? And what if these energy landscapes are designed in collaboration with communities? Could that potentially disrupt the pinch points and the resistance to renewable energy infrastructure? So we've been holding international design competitions since 2010 for cities and sites around the world, also invited competitions. And these are by invitation of cities to reimagine energy landscapes in very specific sites. We won't go into the details of those partnerships right now, but most certainly can in a follow-up conversation if that's interesting.
Going through just a quick summary of some of the amazing ideas, and we were really excited to see, Bjorn, your beautiful examples of artistic energy landscapes. It's very much in the vein of the work that we encourage. And as you can see here, bifacial solar panels laminated technologies that can create splashes of color in urban landscapes.
Also, as we go through, I encourage you to really notice the teams on these. These are truly interdisciplinary and large teams quite often that involve architects and landscape architects and urban planners and energy scientists working together.
All of these are pre-COVID-19 ideas. It will be interesting to see what comes in the future. Here we have organic PV as the artistic element here. The solar hourglass reminds us that there's still time to avert the worst effects of climate change while it also powers 1,000 homes in the city. So a great example of the use of the spaces between our buildings to generate the electricity for our cities. Wave energy devices as a media for public art may be something that we see in the future. And of course, desalination technology designed as a public space and a public amenity with that pool in the center. So a lot of the work that we encourage is around participatory design, and empowering communities to design their own energy landscapes. Because if we are setting these back behind chain link fences with security cameras, energy becomes something foreign, alien, something that has been a visual blight on communities. We have a lot of land banked areas in urban centers where we can do these things, but we have to do them right, and we have to engage people in that process. So we hold things like energy camps, and we very much encourage young people to gain these tools to be able to design their own energy futures in ways that make their cities more vibrant and livable.
And some of the work we do is additionally intergenerational, and that can be seen in some of our solar mural artworks. These are projects that utilize a film that's been developed to place on top of a solar panel. So we think solar murals are an incredible solution for cities. And this is a project that was in collaboration with youngsters in grade 5 in San Antonio, working with elders in that same community.
So you can see some of the design process, engaging people with thinking about what the solar infrastructure of their city can do for us.
And we'll finish there and look forward to a conversation post-presentation. Thank you.
I just want to quickly reiterate, since we do have a minute, that with 10,000 people, I just want to say this again, 10,000 people per day dying because of the consequences of air pollution. That's twice as many people on average as are tragically dying from the COVID-19 crisis. And so not to diminish the tragedy of COVID-19, but just to say that we have other tragedies that are going on at the same time that are as bad on human health impacts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert and Elizabeth. So we will go with questions at the end. And now it's the floor is of Taishi Kuma.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the public space, but sort of the things I'm going to explain is like not like much about energy, but it's more like the sort of the how to learn primitive, like how the primitive like the housing or like the architecture in Japan. Let me share the slide. Okay, so the title is the public realm inside the house. So sort of this is like the kind of our family project almost. We designed the houses, and also we organize and manage the houses, like the share houses around our neighborhood in Tokyo, called the area called Kagurazaka. And So first, like we learned, this is called the Shirakawa-go, the structure. Sort of, this is 300 years old, like the almost like a primitive share housing. So now, like I think it's kind of hard to like maintain, but by the time like the 30 or 40 people living inside of sort of one structure, then like 30, 40 could be like, 2 families or 3 families, and then they even have like the force on the first floor. So in terms of energy, it's nothing technological, but it's very efficient sort of co-living idea. And also even in Tokyo, actually like the Edo era, which is almost like 400 years ago. So this is the before the World War II or like the big earthquake. So we have like we could find the wooden structure everywhere. So also by the time like people like used to like live together, like people also like share like the bathroom or toilet or like the well. So they share everything. So let's say I think that sort of the currently like the share house is like getting popular, but also like in sort of culturally, like we have like the share how to say way of living. So so this is the house we designed almost like 8 years ago, and so it's not like 30, 40 people, but we have the 7 people living in this big box. And the facade is made out of membrane. And then like the entrance is the zipper. If you go inside, so we have like the 10-meter the high ceiling. And sort of, we only have actually the membrane for facade, but this like the share like the high ceiling space sort of, how to say, work as a sort of the air layer, sort of insulation, sort of big insulation layer. So that's why, so each room has always the very like the comfortable the air condition space. And this is the section. So basically in a one big box, we have like the 8 small boxes, and then they are kind of like floating each other. They're not touching each other. So we always sort of keep the gap in between box and box. So it's kind of like the how to say, the capsule house, but how to say, in terms of energy, it's much more efficient since we have like always the air in between these boxes. And then the first floor, which is more like the multifunctional space, my friend showed the fashion collection, or sometimes we for the talk event. So it's actually like work as a public space. Sometimes like, the neighbors like just come inside and they're like, having chill, these kind of things happen. So the public spaces is, the things we could make. That's our concept. And then we have the share bookshelf. So this is the living room. So sort of material-wise, we always use the plywood or the polycarbonate, which is our like kind of industrial material. But I don't know, by tweaking like all the proportion or like the detail. So even though these are like not expensive material, but the space quality is very like unique. And as I said, so we have always the gap in between. So we have like space here. So like this table actually can fit inside of the gap. And so the other project, so as I said, so we design like 3-4 the share housing around our neighborhood. So it's more like, making so commune, it is like not common thing in Tokyo currently. Like people always wants to have like separation, distance. But the things we want to do is, making some community out of share houses. But sometimes, houses like too big, then it takes like 4 years for just designing. So we basically had just empty land, but we want to use it. So then like we decided to design the small trailer house first. So we just sort of the same sort of material wise, it's similar, the plywood, it's not expensive, but we just like designed the one car and then park in the empty lot. And then like we put the bar furniture inside, and then my friend started a wine bar, and then like so this wine bar got really popular. And then since it's a car, we don't need to go through all the architecture regulations. And then like, we just basically put the car. We didn't do, we just put the plants. But then like this, also like this empty lot, like get really almost like work as a park. This is the inside view. And we had a pretty good wine selections too. And then, yeah, this is how we use. Again, sort of I don't know, we didn't even design architecture. We just basically parked one car, and then the place became like the park. So it's also like, the car is movable, of course. So it's basically like we can park anywhere, and then we just need to like change the influx or like water or electricity. It's very like infra-free, the project. And then so actually I was living in New York until like this March. I just moved back to Japan like recently. I mean, that's one reason is apparently like the COVID-19. And then like the sort of the scenery I like in New York is these outdoor staircases. I mean, usually like it's not really allowed to use it, but sometimes people chill like this outside staircase, and also like it's very like, how to say, the outstanding feature of the New York scenery. And also like the nowadays it's the perfect place for chilling with social distance. So we got an inspiration of like the New York staircase. And then so this is the sort of our new share house project, which is actually the where we park the car. So we basically finally we start to like design, and then we start to like construction, and then it'll be completed middle of November finally. So this is like the house for like almost like 15 people, 9 stories high, but the terraces are connected. So like it's kind of like the vertical park. And then like we see like we have like the stairs, like almost like New York stairs. And then like we are thinking to have like the plants, or even like the vineyard, things like that. And then the first floor, it became restaurant, and second floor is office. So it's like, that's like our recent experiment. So, I mean, sort of, I mean, of course, like we can learn or like law from technology, but also like we can learn like from like historical or like the traditional example for like our future life. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tashi, for this very different perspective. So how to integrate everything in a very small space, and how to move the public space into the private space. So now we go to the last speaker, Jorge Toledo Garcia, from a University of Alicante and also Ecosistema Urbano. Jorge?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just share the screen. Okay, can you just confirm this is working? Let me just quickly rearrange the window. And I think we're good to go. Okay, so at Ecosystem Urbano, we work mostly with public spaces at very different scales. Sorry, this should be moving. Oh, wait. Well, different scales and in different locations, different parts of the world. So different climates, different social contexts, and we're kind of getting used to changing the context from one project to the other. We use technology or social technology like methodologies, participatory methodologies, to both try to evolve the social and the environmental context into our projects, like make them take part in the projects. I'm going to quickly show one small project we did some years ago in Dordrecht, in Netherlands. It's basically a playful object, which is designed as a carousel, which people, like children, can turn around by themselves. And then it has a dynamo underneath and generates and stores energy, which is then used to light up the structure in the night. So we create a safer and more light up environment. So of course, I'm not suggesting we use children to generate energy for the cities, even if they have a lot of energy. But this is more like a way of showing different, the three main concepts I would like to maybe highlight in relation to how we connect energy to public space. One is combining functions. Many of the projects you show already do this. It's not only about energy producing structures or facilities or elements, but combining them with other functions like as you can see, like play, like a meeting point, like shading, like different other activities that happen in public spaces anyway. Sorry. Stuck somehow, okay. So another one important thing which was also mentioned before is making the energy cycle shorter, in a way, making it more local. So we are generating the energy and using it in the same place. And we're also making that more visible. Sorry, again, this jumped. Yeah. We're also making that more visible. So we're not hiding energy generating systems somewhere else. We're putting them up front in public spaces, and we're making them, turning them into educational devices also, so people understand how much effort and energy takes to be generated, and how it can be stored and how it can be used. So this structure lights up differently depending on how much it was used during the day, or changes colors. So there's a way of getting direct feedback from energy generation. And these three concepts, I think you will see them in other projects. So I'm going to try to show two more projects. I don't know if I will have time for that. So very quickly, this is in the outskirts of Madrid, a project called the Eco Boulevard, which basically was like this. This was a place designed for cars and not even developed when it started. And the main concept behind the project is that one of the best things you can place on a public space is a tree, because it generates a lot of different benefits for public spaces. It provides shading, improves the temperature around it. It also supports a lot of functions or uses around it. But while the trees were growing, our proposal was to design some kind of artificial trees to make the functions of trees while the rest of the boulevard develops. So you can see these three main structures distributed across the boulevard, basically using the same frame, but then with different systems. One of them focuses on improving the climate underneath with airflow, based on ancient systems that are used in dry and hot climates, but with off-the-shelf current technology that can be used, that is used in agriculture and other industries. So you can see the flow of the air inside the structure. This is how it looks. You can see these intakes of air that conduct the flow of air inside the structure. And on top of it, there's the energy generated in solar panels, which power the whole Eco Boulevard itself. So it's not using energy outside of it, and it's also generating more energy than it uses. You can see this in different activities. These places where people were gathering around these places or using them as meeting points. You can see this is a very focal point in a otherwise not very developed neighborhood. You can see the different activities here. And the other trees, the other artificial trees use different systems for making the same effects, for making more livable public spaces. Basically, you can see the contrast when it was first developed with almost no trees, no shade, very harsh environment, and then how it grows in time and how it's developed. This is another tree, the other one, which is using water atomization for decreasing the temperature also. We've measured almost 10 degrees difference between the outside and the also outside in the middle of the structures. And then you can see, I'm just very quickly going some other activities around these places. It's they became part of the identity of the place at some point. They also became a kind of a challenge for the municipality because they didn't properly know how to manage the energy this was generating or how to maintain it. It was a whole challenge because this was not the regular building or regular the regular furniture you have or equipment you have in a public space. And then 10 years afterwards, after it was built, we were doing a research, like a field research, trying to see how it was, what the effects were on the neighborhood after all this time. And right while we were doing it, COVID came, so we had to go inside, and then after a couple of months, go back to the public space and see what happened. So, well, it's interesting to see how what was once a focal point is now just one more node in the whole boulevard, which is then being used a lot more outside these structures. They are still being used, and being singular structures, they are capable of, people are using them in many different ways, kind of finding ways to use them. You can see they, at some point, they placed like a playful structure inside, playground inside, and then they closed it because it was forbidden by law to use playgrounds. But then the rest of the structure are used by playgrounds in a way, because they weren't designed to be something else. We didn't know specifically. So people are kind of improvising the possible uses. And you can see how the use, which was focused around this structure, was then spreading during these last months across the whole boulevard, and having even isolated and separated furniture is becoming a feature suddenly. So both the size of the structures, which allows people to distribute themselves around this focal point, and the more extensive approach of the rest of the boulevard are becoming complementary in a way. And just a quick note, because I'm already past the time, these base structures have been adapted to different climates. This is an exhibition pavilion we did in Shanghai in 2010. And as you can see, in this case, we used, instead of solar panels, we used air generated energy, and then instead of water sprinklers inside, we use these huge ventilators. So the same concept was adapted to different places, which is kind of the main objective behind this project. I'm not going to go into the next project for this. We can maybe see it on other time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. So now we have all the presentations done, and I ask Agatino to join me in this part of the session. We have already some questions for the speakers so that I can try to summarize. We are at least one question for speaker. So there was one which I would address to Bjorn. I first say what are the questions, and then we can go with the answers. So there was a question about how normally renewable energy is generated, because they say we are talking about urban areas, but where are normally produced? Let's say that the answer, of course, it's outside of the urban areas, but the most interesting part of the question is how to move this process inside the city and how to deal and how to manage all let's say possibilities that I think are regulatory or relationships with local authorities and so on. So how to move this process inside the city? This would be the first question. Then for Daniele Santucci, there is one question: how do you choose the areas where you do your climate walks? Then there is one question for Robert and Elizabeth that I would address also actually to the other speakers. So the question is, you showed what you normally do with your land art generator initiative. What would you add now after the COVID experience? And this is something that I would address also to the other speakers, because it seems that, let's say, the general recipe is a kind of shared among you all. So the approaches are similar, and there is a kind of convergence. At the same time, what is the new ingredient that the COVID is introducing now? I go first with all the questions, and then we go also to ask Vincent to comment. But I first would like to say what are all the questions to give a context. Then there is one question for Taishi Kuma. And the question is regarding the building he showed, as the first example he showed, if he could better comment on the climate behavior of the building. And to now, there are still no questions for Jorge, but for sure I have the same question that I asked to Robert and Elizabeth, because as the presentation was very pragmatic, so what you really do, what you are adding now after the COVID experience. And before going to the answers, I would ask Vincent Kitio to give his feedbacks and adding whatever he likes to add.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. I just want to thank all the panelists for a very, very informative presentation. I have to say that at the beginning, I was a little bit very skeptic about the topic, because normally renewable energy required a lot of space for the generation. And also, when you look at the different types, there are 6 types of renewable energy, from wind energy, hydropower, solar system, biomass, biogas. All this technology required a lot of space for it to be generated within the city context. And if now we talk about the open space, it becomes even more complicated to generate. But your different presentation has shown that this is possible. Starting from the first presentation, whereby the issue of energy demand. We are living in the world where we depend on energy. And as the world urbanizes rapidly, so is also the increase of demand of energy. And we also understand that the more energy we consume, the more greenhouse gas emission we are also producing, which again come to the issue of climate change. There have been different presentations. One presentation clearly demonstrated that is COVID-19 going to put in the in the background climate change, but it was clearly demonstrated that this cannot happen, because if we look at the effect, the impact of climate change that we are seeing today, it's really creating more damages, more fatalities, even compared to the effect of COVID-19. And therefore, climate change, we cannot put it in the backyard. We need to address climate change. We need to do that by promoting climate change mitigation. We need also to adapt our cities. It was also clearly mentioned the impact, rather the effect of air pollution, which is related also to the type of consumption that we have in terms of energy. It was saying that 10,000 people dying every day as a result of climate change, as a result of air pollution. We have seen that during the COVID-19 and the fact that everything was stopped, there were very interaction within the cities. We have seen some cities whereby they have their air pollution, their clean air increase. And that's why there is also this idea of building from the COVID and reducing air pollution. And again, the different presentation and also the different, the different technology presented, and then at the same time also the type of participatory design of public space really show that it is possible to use renewable energy in the public space through participation, community participation. And we also see during this presentation the different solution. That solution exists. Solution of low carbon solution do exist. So there is a clear role that renewable energy can play in city. What was also very, very, very important through the presentation, you have noticed I'm not mentioning the different name, but again, because it was, I'm taking the whole presentation, all the presentation together, each of them was trying to contribute to the topic and contribute positively to the topic. From the issue of thermal comfort, whereby and behave in the public space, we need to have a comfort. So in the public space, we don't need to have solar system to create that thermal comfort. Just the presence of a tree could actually slow down the temperature. We saw the example of in Venice where people were seated under the trees enjoying their comfort there because the temperature difference there was actually different. We also saw in the Eco Boulevard in Spain how it was also possible to recreate the nature using artificial means. And of course, before COVID, those places were used as attractive space for concerts, for coming together. And again, it really shown that it is possible to use renewable energy in city, in public space. What also struck me, and I want to highlight it here, is this going back to basic, going back to the traditional architecture. We saw the traditional architecture, the sharing space in Japan, that was actually explaining that because we know that open space is a shared place, that we should also look into the tradition, into our tradition to find solutions that can be implemented today. Some of you that have visited, for example, master cities, you will notice that in one of the plaza within the master city in Abu Dhabi, which is a desert climate, we have this artificial ventilation evaporative tower. When you stand under that evaporative tower, you actually gain a sense of relief from the hardship of the temperature surrounding it. And we saw from the presentation, I think from Jorge, how we could use this ancient Arab technology to cool down our open space. And again, looking at all the differences, all the different presentations, there was also the mention on having a city as a prosumer, as a place where we can generate and also consume energy to reduce the transmission loss that we normally have, and of course, to also reduce our carbon footprint. And again, I wish to conclude this observation just by mentioning also the fact that, because one of the questions that was asked at the beginning, how is the future of the open space post-pandemic? My answer is, although we have seen the trend in the transition towards a cleaner energy option, and again, we are still having the majority of the people of the energy consumed today are still from fossil fuel. I believe that the transition towards net zero carbon emission is possible from this different presentation that has been shown today. We saw that we are not just talking about solar, wind. We also saw the example whereby you can actually use human power, muscular power to generate energy in the park. And that energy can also be used to charge mobile phone and also enhance communication. From here, I will bring perhaps, if you allow me, one example of similar technology that was adopted in South Africa, where they are using, they call it the roundabout pump, where they install this pump in the school, and the kids, while playing around, they pump water for their own needs. And again, this is just to show you that we should not look energy as a means per se, but energy is there to serve a purpose. Energy is there to bring a good comfort. That can just be a shelter, like we saw in the traditional, in the bioclimatic architecture in Japan. Energy is there to bring light. Energy is there to also, as we saw in one of the presentation, is also a very important things to see, to enjoy seeing the different energy option, like what we saw in Sweden with a mixture of solar panel, hydropower, and also wind power. And again, this was actually to say that, yes, it is possible to create an aesthetic open space that includes energy, because one of the issues that was highlighted right from the beginning was the acceptance of this artificial element that can be renewable energy. Like again, we have this discourse of not in my backyard. But the issue is, do you prefer flooding? Do you prefer temperature rise than just having a wind turbine in your backyard? So again, the question is open. I think we are in this world to enjoy the world, and sometimes we should also compromise on our expectation. But again, the presentation that showed the butterfly placed on solar panel actually showed that, again, if sometimes the aesthetic is a problem, we can improve it. I stop here. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, for your intervention. We really appreciate that you decided to join our webinar. As you should know, because we wrote the curriculum of Vincent on our webpage, Vincent Kitio is an architect with a PhD in appropriate energy technologies for developing countries from the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and he's currently the chief of the Urban Energy Unit at UN Habitat, a section that works on 3 focus areas: universal energy access for the urban poor, energy efficiency in the built environment, and renewable energy technologies in urban areas. Vincent is also working on several other projects related to promoting energy efficiency in buildings in East Africa, mainstreaming energy and resource efficiency measures, especially related to Africa and the Global South. And Vincent also represents UN Habitat in the UN Energy, which objective is to help ensure coherence among all UN agencies on addressing energy issues for sustainable development, as well as supporting the Sustainable Energy for All decade. And he also represents UN Habitat in the advisory board of the Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa. I know Vincent because we met several times now, also because Vincent speaks beautiful Italian, so it's easy also for us to be engaged. And I would also to say that Vincent is currently working on a project for affordable and energy efficient tiny houses in Africa. That's what we discussed recently, and he actually created a mock-up of this tiny house that was exhibited during the UN Habitat Assembly last year in Nairobi. So maybe you can also say something about this last project you are developing, Vincent, because I think it is also very important that we use this knowledge that we saw from all these speakers, how to use this knowledge for the Global South.
Thank you very much, Luisa, for bringing this this issue. Just to mention, in fact, I just wanted to use the opportunity to really tell the speaker that I'll be more engaged with you even after this discussion, for one reason. At the moment, we have in Africa the housing deficit, the affordable or the social housing deficit. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's estimated at 130 million homes. So
shall we maybe like listen the answers from the speakers while Vincent will get it back? What do you think, Luisa?
Yes, because we lost Vincent.
Great. Okay, so speakers, you heard the questions. Now it's your time. Bjorn, would you like to be the first?
Yes. Okay. If I remember it right, how do we transform this process of larger scale facilities moving out of the city? And as I mentioned in my foreword, it was basically that's not what we want. It's an all-scale solution that is the most beneficial. I think we cannot choose either or. But the all-scale solution is addressing CO2 emissions. I think that's what's important. So getting away from coal, getting away from oil, nuclear, those are the kind of ambitions that we should have. It's not about getting away from large-scale solutions. But to make that happen, we also need to combine it with the small-scale solution, because the small-scale solution is is a possibility to make create accessibility for much more people to have both, of course, electricity production on their own, but also becoming part of the economy. I think that also is a very, very important part of this discussion. So that's actually, in some sense, what's happening now in Sweden with electric cars. People in their homes start selling electricity to passing buyers, which means that we are distributing the line of consumption into everyone's homes. And I think that transition is much more important than talking about large-scale or small-scale solutions. And I also want to add to the fact to one thing that Vincent was talking about, but also Agatino was talking about in the beginning. What could architects do about this? And I think, from my point of view, the role of architect is both enlightening, both looking backwards and building on to what we already know and traditional knowledge. I think that's super important. And that also means a cultural context, whether it's winter climate or it's a sub-Saharan climate. It's two completely different solutions to it. But we also are, I think we also are bound to talk about the quality of public space. We all are probably quite used to building integrated photovoltaics. That's not an issue, but the public space is an issue. And in this sense, I think the COVID-19 situation might be a way of talking on how we can increase the amount of public space through the introduction of renewables. So basically what we're talking about here is energy once again becoming a means to a better city. And I think that's
very, very interesting. I will move now to Elizabeth and Robert. There was a question for you. Do you remember your question?
Yes.
Great, go ahead.
And it's a really great question. So for the last decade of programming for the Land Art Generator Initiative, one of our strengths has been that we're always on the ground. We get an email or a phone call and we show up anywhere around the world. Of course, that's changed in the last few months, including our educational programming, which is really critical to our mission as a nonprofit organization. So this is giving us an opportunity to pause, regroup, and rethink how we program. And, you know, we can't always be hands-on as we move forward. And there's a carbon footprint with that we have to negotiate. So really, this is a positive opportunity for us to start creating toolkits that can go out into the public realm so that communities can work without us being hands-on. So that's how we've regrouped. We're creating an incredible board game as our educational component for Logi 2020 Fly Ranch that's in collaboration with a board game development company. And it's going to provide tools that really take people through project management, stepping in many roles of project manager, rancher, land conservationist, philanthropist, designer, energy expert, with the outcome of designing, dreaming, designing, and implementing renewable energy and other sustainable systems on a site. So that's what we think is a positive, is that we're going to create more robust tools that can go out into the world, always free and easy to download from our website, but also printed and mailed out.
As we shelter in place, we might as well be playing board games that educate us about our energy futures. And then when the vaccine does come, and it will come soon, I hope, we can get back to engaging in the co-creation of our built infrastructure and have in-person workshops, because nothing beats that, of course. It's forcing us to expand our virtual tool set, but we do know that we will all come back together. We will go back to a world where we can come and hug people again. We have to. That's a part of our humanity. And so hopefully this pause will strengthen us for that. And we look forward to
hugging again.
Yes.
hopefully soon. And the next question was for Daniela. Do you remember your question?
Yes, I do. The question was where we do the climate walks, and so we do them everywhere. We have done them so far basing on research cooperations or We have done some for non-NGOs or international organizations that want to use them also as a participatory design tool. So the climate walks turn out to be a very strong tool in that sense, because people get conscious about the environmental conditions in their neighborhood. And because besides the thermal comfort, we also measure the air quality. So this is something we have been integrating in the last year. And the outcomes are pretty interesting. So we use them both in cooperation with designers when it's about to create new parks or reshape streets. Yeah, so we are open to any kind of cooperation and all over the world. Hopefully we will be able to travel again soon.
Great. So some other question here. Alessandra, also you can help me because there is like quite a long stream.
So there was a question that was regarding the microclimatic behavior of the building is showed. The first one.
Yeah, it is for whom?
For Taishi Kuma.
Okay.
Can you say it again, the question? I couldn't hear.
So there was a person who was very interested in the first building you showed, in particular regarding the microclimatic behavior of the building.
Right.
Some insights, if possible.
Right. So as I said, that the membrane doesn't have any like the insulation capacity or quality, but you know, like the membrane is just, you know, separating the outside and inside public space, which is not a private space. So that whole public area sort of works as a sort of insulation layer. It's like we have like big insulation layer. You know, usually like insulation layer is, you know, in between outside wall and inside wall. But in our case, sort of insulation layer is actually public space. It's really big. So that's why sort of air doesn't move. And then, you know, of course, that public space is actually like, if the outside is hot, it's very hot. And the outside is cold, it's very cold. But the private space, which is like inside of that public space, which is like always, you know, the, how to say, good temperature or good environment. Yeah, basically that's how it works. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
It does.
Yes. Okay, so thank you, Taishi.
Yeah, and then there is somebody reflecting also on the metaphor of the tree exactly with the projects that Jorge was also showing. And if you can see the stream, this person also would like to share with you more about this. Jorge, do you want to say like something very short about this, or can I continue?
Yeah, I didn't understand exactly the question about that.
Yeah, no, it was not a question, it was more a remark about this metaphor. But then there are some people also who are interested like on the co-creation aspects of these projects. A little bit Elizabeth and Robert touch on this, also Bjorn. And there is a question coming also from Sweden about this. I'm not sure if you can see actually your speakers these questions. There was one coming from Torun. Where is it? Here. So it's difficult it is important that people understand the values of the place. So how do we reflect on this, on the values of this place and the energy question? Probably something we have touched already on this. Is there anyone who wants to react on this?
We would like to. You know, we think that this is really important. There is case study after case study that really proves that there can be a failure in an energy system and the infrastructure if community is not involved. And that could be because of NIMBY impact, that could be because there's not knowledge transfer on how to maintain a system. There's a wide range of reasons. But it always points towards, you really must include community at early stages of these conversations for there to be a successful outcome. And, you know, these energy systems have the potential to respond not just to the site and the climate and weather, but also to local culture and the people who are there and what matters to that group of people.
And by engaging people, you can come up with solutions that are interactive and can change over time. These infrastructures are designed for a life cycle of 30 years or perhaps more with different technologies. So as people come and go, this knowledge needs to be transferred. And how does the design of the original installation encourage that and reinforce that? Because if people take pride in their own energy landscapes that they helped to design and maybe even build, then it makes it more less risky that these things will just break and become, if an inverter, it goes bad 10 years into a solar project, you're missing 20 years of energy production unless the people know how to immediately address it. And it has to be something that the artwork engages people with that answer.
Exactly. And one final comment for somebody, from somebody was the issue we didn't touch. We didn't have the time to talk about the new pattern of mobility, how this under COVID-19 is going to change. I think a little bit I mentioned in the beginning, I apologize, I didn't have time to elaborate on this a bit also. I think Bjorn and somebody else was also touching on this. I think it is an entire topic to develop. Maybe this would be like something for Luisa and Hendrik to think of, to have a further discussion about this. But I think that is a very important issue, that mobility, and we are interested to understand how it works, and we are worried for what is the message right now that is use your private car. So it's like going back like 20 years. So that's something to maybe discuss another time. I give now the floor back to the owners of this event. We overshoot of 17 minutes at the moment, but thank you so much. I will give you back to you the words.
Thank you, Tino. Actually, we are already planning a webinar on public space and mobility. So we know that this is an issue right now during the pandemic and after the pandemic, because we want to progress, not to go back to the past. We have to learn from the mistakes that we made in the past and go forward. But before we close this webinar, I would like to give back the floor to Vincent. Vincent, can you hear me?
Yes, Luisa, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Sorry, but at some point we lost connection with you, so we went back to the speakers. So I was asking and referring to your latest project on affordable and energy efficient tiny houses in Africa, and how we can contribute by using this knowledge for Africa and the Global South.
Thank you very much, Luisa. Just to say that it has been discussed during this webinar, the importance of design thinking process and also the participatory design. We were all talking about public space. Now imagine if we use this same approach to address the housing shortage. We know globally 1 billion people are without adequate housing. So basically, this is really a huge potential. If we could use the architect brain and use all these type of processes to address that, it will be huge. It will be very important. We at UN Habitat, 2 years ago, during the big UN conference in New York, we built a tiny house, and that was very, very well appreciated, because within that tiny house, we have renewable energy to provide energy, and we also designed the house using bioclimatic principle. We use locally available material, and we also focus on the basic needs. And we receive a lot of reaction from the public. And we decided to use the same methodology. And I think one of the participants to this webinar was also Dr. Josephine, which is a lecturer at the University of Rwanda. We use a participatory process to design a small home that can actually address the needs of the house. And then we came out, we said that with a 46 square meter, we can actually shelter a medium-sized family, African family. And based on that, we developed this house, which was visited by more than 2,500 people. And now the idea is that we really need to industrialize the housing sector in Africa if we are to address the housing shortage. As I speak today, the housing deficit in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated, the social housing is estimated at 130 million houses that Africa need to build in the next 10 years if we are to address just one SDG, that is SDG 11 target 1, that is providing affordable housing for all. So I'm just inviting you here and say that this is an opportunity. We are now engaging with Luisa. We also engage with some university in Italy, Politecnico of Torino, and also Politecnico of Trento, to come out with a house that can be seen as a Lego, no? A modular house that you start from small and you grow, because that house has to be affordable, it has to be adequate, it also has to be sustainable, so as to address the issue of climate change, which we all agree during this presentation, that is fundamental. I have seen some pictures from Verona, how the weather pattern has really changed, and the trees, the flooding, and also in my own country, Cameroon, 2 cities has been submerged by water. So this is climate change, making more victims than the coronavirus. But of course, in addressing coronavirus, we also need to address this physical distancing. How can people apply the physical distancing when you have 7 persons living in one tiny house of 9 square meters? So it's really, perhaps I will just conclude by saying that the challenges outside there is huge. Let's bring renewable energy so that we reduce our carbon footprint from using the fossil fuel, because we need to transition towards that direction. But at the same time, let's also address other basic needs. That is already open space is very much important, because we need, that is a shared space, as the presentation from Japan clearly indicates, that human being has always been living in the shared environment. And that's why open space is fundamental. Now, at the same time, we also need our individual private space that are homes. So let's also build those homes. And perhaps maybe this may also be a challenge, not a challenge, a call for a future webinar on affordable house or tiny house, linked to the open space, but at the same time as a response to COVID-19. Thank you very much for having me in this very important webinar. Thank you, Luisa. Back to you.
Yeah, maybe it's time to thank everyone for the contribution. Vincent, thanks very much. Also to Alessandra and Tino, who basically came to us with this a very exciting topic, and I hope that also attendees feel that it's worthwhile to follow all these amazing speakers. So thank you also for everyone who joined today to contribute and give your share with us your amazing work. And thanks to the attendee that joined today. And I think before we close, Luisa will very briefly explain, even though the August sessions are over, but we still will continue. And there is, I think, an exciting program also for September. So, Luisa.
Yes, I would like to thank as well all the speakers and all attendees for contributing again to the discussion on public space. I think we had a very productive session, and we will later publish the video of the webinar and the short summary on our website, so you can still follow these speakers and their activities by reading or the summary, and we will also provide additional links and reading materials from all the speakers. I would like to announce very briefly our next and last series in September. We will have 4 webinars as usual every Thursday. The title of the webinars are already included in the web page of the program of the initiative on the website of the Journal of Public Space. From the homepage, you click on the horizontal menu on COVID-19 initiative, and you can see the whole program. So we are covering some other topics like tactical urbanism, right to the city for children, digital innovation, and this will be the first 3 webinars, and the last one will be a final reflection on this whole series. So the last webinar will be our 20th webinar, and it will be on our future cities, public space initiatives, innovative policies and creative actions to recover during and after the pandemic. And later in November, with Hendrik, we are organizing a web conference that will happen at the beginning of November. Maybe you want to say something, Hendrik?
No, I think we mentioned it last time also already. So basically you can mark already 6 and 7 of November, and we will basically look back at this entire year and ask some of our great speakers to come back and reflect again what has happened. I think there will be also hopefully the team from UN Habitat joining us again. There will be also a special session on the role of universities as public space in the age of pandemics, because for many of us, we are involved in teaching, or we might have children who are in schools or universities. And what does it actually mean when basically every teaching activity is online, and basically all this what connects universities and we make actually a real university, the exchange between different people and so on. If this is not there, or can we rebuild this digitally, or what else can we do? So there will be, on one hand, picking up some of the earlier topics and some new ones, and so we will hope you will join again for that session. So that's...
Yes, and we are producing a special issue of the Journal of Public Space with around 30 articles as commentaries and research papers that will be considered as a follow-up somehow to this whole initiative. So we are still very active, a lot of energy also from our side on public space. So we hope to see you again in September, and do not forget to apply for our call for speakers in case you're interested to be engaged. And also please share the news across your networks and join us again next month.
Okay. Thank you very much to everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.